Feed your future self with magic internet money.
If Trump gets reelected versus say Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, or Andrew Yang, or I guess the only other one that could do it is Warren. They seem to want Elizabeth Warren to be the Democratic nominee. I don't think Biden's going to do it, but let's say it's Bernie Sanders or Warren. Like, what do you think happens?
As a non-American who isn't really involved, so my opinion obviously isn't very informed. That said, it seems like it's almost an impossibility that he doesn't win. To me, I don't see how that happens at all.
Well, I can tell you how he could lose, but continue.
Yeah. So your question is, how does it affect Bitcoin?
Yeah. What do you think that those two scenarios will do to the price? Because I'm always trying to think about how to be prepared and how to be hedged and how to
I guess I don't really know. Definitely not informed enough to have a serious opinion. The only thing I can think of is that it seems that Trump's administration has been, at least the way they say, I don't know about what their actual actions, but the way they say things, it seems like they're the most anti-Bitcoin administration ever in the United States. I'm not sure if that actually has any actionable steps involved, but at least the way they, Trump is the first president ever to say that Bitcoin sucks, basically.
Yeah.
I guess you could say that if someone else is in office, then maybe that's somehow better, but...
Well, Obama did say that Bitcoin is like a Swiss bank account in your pocket.
I don't think he said Bitcoin. I think he said, if I remember correctly, he said that there are ways, you can have a Swiss bank account in your pocket.
Oh, he didn't say Bitcoin?
Yeah, Trump basically said, no, I don't think this Bitcoin thing is going to be... I don't like it. He tweeted something, right? And Mnuchin basically said that people use it the criminals use it and so on. And he just said that they're against it, basically.
Yeah, well, Mnuchin, I think, was the guy that was denying that any fraud happens with the US dollar on CNBC.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but on the other hand, that's just like words. I don't know if it has any real meaning. So I don't know.
I think Bitcoin went up when Trump tweeted bad things about Bitcoin.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure if that means anything, but yeah.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I think that whoever wins, in the regulatory area, things are probably going to get worse in the next couple of years for Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies. It seems like, the rope is tightening, basically. And I don't think I think this trend is probably going to continue for a while. So, stricter KYC controls everywhere. It's not even just a US thing. It's going to probably be everywhere.
It does feel like that, regulations all over the world are sort of, but maybe because we're so in this debate on Twitter all the time, we just have a bit of a bearish mentality towards things.
Maybe. You do see that, exchanges seem to be preparing for big crackdown. That's something that seems to be happening across all exchanges right now. I think people generally expect things to become more difficult because they have been kind of easy so far. There hasn't been a major pushback.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the biggest thing that people noticed in the Western world in the last couple of years was, the tax authorities became more involved pretty much everywhere. But other than that, there hasn't been a lot of pushback. And so we kind of had it easy so far. And obviously, if this thing continues and doesn't just die off organically, then obviously it's going to happen.
Well, the thing that gives me hope that there won't be a massive clampdown is just the actions that the SEC and the CFTC have taken so far. And you had the chairman of the CFTC, Giancarlo, say that his niece has Bitcoin, and who are we to say that this is not going to be used? And he had kind of a good tone about Bitcoin and about regulating it.
I mean, they're not gonna, the SEC probably isn't gonna be the most active force. I would just expect that, you would have much stricter KYC controls everywhere, and that you would be required to really show, where coins come from whenever you deposit them. They would always ask. I would imagine, you could expect to see some standardized format that exchanges would be able to move between them to describe, where coins come from.
Yeah.
And that if you don't have that, you wouldn't be able to deposit or whatever. So, things like that are probably coming at some point.
Yeah. And it does kind of feel a little bit, I struggle with the civilization of Bitcoin as an investment product, if you know what I'm saying. all these regulated institutional funds and stuff are starting. And while, yes, that's really good for driving the awareness of Bitcoin and allowing institutions to like put money into Bitcoin in a regulated way, like pension funds and retirement funds and all this stuff, all these mega like multi-$100 billion funds are now able to start getting exposure to Bitcoin. That's great for the price of Bitcoin, but they're not actually getting Bitcoin. They're not promoting the usage of the Bitcoin network.
Yeah.
They're just pushing the price of Bitcoin up basically and centralizing the supply to these custodians.
Yeah.
So that's kind of not what I got into Bitcoin for, but it also is like that's going to happen with money, with any form of money. It's going to become not very well distributed because the people with the power are going to want some of it and they're going to want more of it. And it's just going to always be ended up not equally distributed.
Yeah. I mean, whether we like it or not, I mean, if Bitcoin sticks around, obviously those things are going to happen.
Bitcoin Cash people always complain about that. They're always like, oh, the Bitcoiners used to be for peer-to-peer money and now they're just for like Wen Moon pushing Wall Street in and all that stuff. But I always think of it like, you're going to say the same thing. If Bitcoin Cash became adopted as the world's currency, don't you think like funds are going to want to get some and all this stuff? Like whatever the cryptocurrency is, if it achieves this massive milestone of success, so much that like sovereign wealth funds want to put $100 billion in the currency, it's going to happen. So it's not a Bitcoin thing. It's not like Blockstream as this conspiracy to like centralize Bitcoin to the NASDAQ or something like that. It's just, it becomes so valuable as an asset that everybody wants some, and the people that have most of the money are going to want some.
Right. Yeah. If it sticks around, it has to happen. It doesn't matter what we think about it. It has to happen. But I guess that the thing that people feared since very early on, I mean, you can find like threads on Bitcoin talk about this, is that there would basically be like two Bitcoins. You know, it would be the same, like technically it would be the same network and the same coin, but you would have like the white Bitcoins, the regulated Bitcoins, and you would have the off-market Bitcoins that are not used on regulated markets. And there would be just a huge price disparity because you wouldn't be able to move them from one side to the other. That's the thing that people, well, that was the thing that always caught my eye. I was most concerned about, because it seems like almost inevitable that this happens because it can happen. You know, it's technically feasible that, again, you know, every exchange will just require you to explain where coins come from, and it will probably happen automatically too. And they would just have to have this information in order to allow you to trade. So you would just have those two separate economies, and both will use Bitcoins, but those Bitcoins won't be interchangeable.
That's the fungibility debate that's happening now, where the things that we're developing, like confidential transactions and I guess Schnorr signatures and stuff, is all these privacy things that allow you to enhance your privacy. And then there's the apps like Wasabi and Samurai Wallet and different mixers that allow you to mix up your coins so that for people that don't know, like Bitcoin isn't a thing. It's like the UTXO, which is your wallet controls UTXOs, which add up to be the Bitcoins. And you can mix them all with other people so that you get your Bitcoin back, but it's not yours. It's mixed with all these other people's. And that is supposed to increase fungibility. And fungibility just means that one unit of it is the exact same value as another unit of it. But like Udi was just saying, like technically, it's definitely possible for banks and exchanges and these financial watchdogs and stuff to say, well, this Bitcoin address and the UTXOs in this Bitcoin wallet are now blacklisted. And they have done that. They've added like a couple of addresses to the OFAC blacklist before, which then would create the black market for some coins that are now tainted. And like the hope is that we will be able to make mixing so popular that that like the fungibility will be retained for the long term. But we're fighting for that. But then there's some people like Trace Mayer who are saying, like, you know, don't mix your coins. Why take the risk? You know, you could be mixing with somebody that's doing something illegal, and then eventually it'll get tracked to your wallet, and then you'll like have a risk there that you won't be able to get the full value of your Bitcoins.
Right.
So for people who don't want to take that risk, then just buy it with your KYC on an exchange that's clean. I don't mind taking that risk personally because I'm more of like philosophically motivated to enhance the fungibility of Bitcoin. So I like to use exchanges like Bull Bitcoin that does mixing by default.
Right. I mean, I would say that, we can think about like the end game, the state, how things are going to be like when they settle down and how we're going to get there. And the way to get there is going to probably be very rocky, right? But the end state, I think it's very possible that there will be like automated tools that would collect and report all data about what you do with your Bitcoins, where you got them from, about your regulated Bitcoins. And it wouldn't even be a blacklist. So a blacklist is when you say 1, 2, 3 is not allowed and the rest is okay, right? But it would be a whitelist where they would say only 1, 2, 3 are allowed. The rest is automatically not allowed unless you can explain where that came from. Because blacklisting in Bitcoin is difficult. The problem is if they choose to do whitelisting, because then they could just say, you know what, you have to prove that this is okay. This is your problem. Go ahead and prove to us that this is fine. Otherwise, the exchange is just not allowed to accept it.
The way around that is to only deal with peer-to-peer. So to spread the usage of Bitcoin is
Right.
better for everybody, because then you don't need to like go through an exchange. You can actually just buy and sell services and goods and stuff for Bitcoin. So you're not even going to dollars. You just use Bitcoin. That's the ultimate goal for a lot of us. But we're also realists and know that right now the shekels have been doing fine and dollars have been doing fine. Like it appears like our currencies are all doing fine. So it's so easy to use them. Like the PayPal app is great. Like just use these fiat apps, and then maybe there's like Libra happens and that's fine. So it kind of would take an economic collapse or like an apocalyptic event economically to shake the global trust in fiat money for people to start using an alternative money system like Bitcoin. So for now, it's like most people are going to get their exposure to Bitcoin from exchanges and stuff like that. And they're not going to be using it day to day.
Yeah, probably.
So yeah, this is an issue. And I think like if Trump continues his reign, like he's the king.
If the Trump regime stays in
power, then let's say that wasn't just some stupid tweet. Like he tweets ridiculous things all the time. He tweets the mighty power of the United States Army will rain down on Iran with the $2 trillion of weapons we've just created. Like he tweets these really dramatic things all the time. So I don't put that much weight into him saying that Bitcoin is a threat and all that, because he just says stupid things all the time. Like really, really absurdly worded things.
Yeah.
Like if he stays in power and his advisors or whatever do push this anti-Bitcoin thing, then yeah, we probably will see like fungibility of Bitcoin be challenged, and there will be whitelists, and then there'll be like tainted Bitcoins that will trade on a like unregulated exchange for a discount. Like we're not seeing that happen yet. So I don't think we're going to see that. All I think we will see is that it'll be harder to sell tainted Bitcoins, but they will sell at unregulated exchanges. We saw Binance recently was like questioning users about their withdrawal address because it was like they used Wasabi to mix Bitcoins or something like that. So they were like, asking extra questions. And
Yeah, that was Binance Singapore, though. It wasn't like the main Binance exchange.
But that's a trend that I think we will see. I think you're right. We will start seeing that. But
yeah,
I don't necessarily think we'll get to that point. It's worth thinking about, but I don't think we'll get to the point where like tainted Bitcoins will trade at a 10% discount than the other Bitcoins. But I do think we'll see regulated like funds and stuff prefer to hold safer Bitcoin UTXOs, like freshly mined coins or coins that don't have any taint through a chain analysis. I think then they will just want to have those coins just because why take the risk? They're regulated. Why take the risk? But then like the Ross Ulbricht coins were confiscated by the FBI and then they were sold to Tim Draper. So there were coins that were used on dark markets and stuff. So they kind of set a precedent already to be able to clean coins.
Well, yeah, of course, if you have like an entity, a government that is allowed to say which coins are okay and which aren't, then obviously if they choose, they can take tainted coin and make it clean again. That's always in their power to do that. That's why it's a great position to have, right? To be the government in that scenario. That comes with the plan, I guess. The question is just how far are they going to take it, I think, because they could technically take it to this completely clamped down, super control, where if you can't explain where this money came from, you just won't be able to put it on any regulated market, and you will have to use unregulated markets for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're going to try to do that, because maybe it's a bad idea for them, because maybe then the unregulated markets become very successful, but they could try. They definitely have the ability to try. So yeah.
Well, there's also the game theory, like you just mentioned, of unregulated versus regulated, but then also versus differently regulated. So the plus token Ponzi was recently like analyzed by this guy Ergo BTC.
Yeah.
He saw that like a lot of Bitcoin, I can't remember how much, but like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin was collected by these Ponzi scammers and then mixed and then sent to Huobi, which is a Chinese exchange. And Huobi let them sell all this Bitcoin, and then that jumped the price down because there was tons of sell pressure, and then kind of went up recently from 6,000s to now 9,000 because the sell pressure is finished from the Huobi token for the most part. That's the speculation. This guy analyzed their chain analysis, like seeing the Bitcoins come in, seeing them mix, and then seeing them go to Huobi, and then the price dumped as the volume increased to sell. So obviously it looks like China's okay with letting these
yeah.
coins be sold.
Yeah, so that's true. The thing we have going for us is that it's probably going to be difficult for all nations to collaborate on the same set of rules. It does seem like all Western countries are kind of in agreement, though. So, we already see that there's like kind of the Western exchanges and the more Asian exchanges that seem to be less regulated. So we already have that, and probably that difference will continue. But for anyone living in a Western country, that might become a problem at some point.
I wonder, why didn't the plus token scammers use MakerDAO for their Ponzi scheme?
I mean, use it in what way exactly?
Like they did this $1 billion Ponzi. Why were they using Bitcoin?
Right.
Why weren't they using MakerDAO if it's supposed to be this so great decentralized?
Oh, you mean because it's tiny? I mean, it was really small.
Right. I'm kind of being facetious, but like
I think they stole more money than the entire DAI supply. So obviously DAI wasn't a good choice for them.
Yeah, they should have just bought Maker tokens and then done the Ponzi on MakerDAO, and then they would have mooned the price of their other tokens too.
Well, sure.
I don't know how that works, but that's what the Ethereum Foundation is doing actually.
I mean, obviously, if you're gonna scam, you want to use the most liquid options you have. So it makes a lot of sense that they chose Bitcoin and ETH. I'm surprised they didn't use Tether, because it's probably more liquid than ETH is. But maybe they just prefer ETH for whatever reason.
Well, it's kind of true. Like the utility of Bitcoin is so great that criminals want to use it.
Sure.
I mean, that's why the US dollar is the number one used currency for criminals, because it has tons of liquidity and everybody accepts it. So these Ponzi scammers knew that they could leverage the Bitcoin brand because people get excited by the idea of having Bitcoin. So if they had have promoted the Ponzi like as, EOS tokens instead of Bitcoin, it probably wouldn't have been as successful. But because all these Chinese people wanted Bitcoin, they got convinced that they could make more Bitcoin by joining the plus token thing. So they bought Bitcoin, and then, they used Bitcoin as their lever to get people shoveled into this Ponzi. And it was good for marketing for them, I guess. It succeeded. They did have EOS and ETH, but not nearly as much. It was like maybe.
Oh, they had EOS too, yeah.
Yeah, it was like 90% Bitcoin or something, I think.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. They have to use like one of the big digital currencies, obviously. They can't use PayPal for that. So
right. And they have to use one that's decentralized, because if they use one that's semi-centralized or centralized, then if it gets big enough, there's a risk that they get rolled back.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like the DAO hacker. Or like it's easy for EOS, for the block producers, to freeze coins right on the chain. They've done that before. They just, without even voting, they just like, oh, we're going to freeze these coins.
Yeah.
So it's not the hardest form of money.
Oh, no.
EOS and ETH.
EOS is not even close. Yeah.
This conversation was kind of a bit of insider baseball. I hope my listener, all one listener, got something out of this.
Yeah, well, it's, if you have one listener now and they liked it, they might send it to one friend, and then, it's two listeners next time. That's how we grow.
Yeah, and then you just find 2 to listen and then tell those 2 to listen.
It's like Ethereum, man. We have more podcasts than listeners.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Ethereum has developers, app developers. Bitcoin has podcasters.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, so whether Trump wins, whether Andrew Yang wins, hopefully Yang or Sanders wins, and then the regulators aren't as, they won't take such an adversarial stance to Bitcoin. But I'm hopeful that we're going to find a friendly resolution to how to regulate Bitcoin, and there will be a real decentralized market, and people like Jack from Twitter will continue supporting Lightning Network, and we'll see more tech companies adopt Bitcoin or support Bitcoin. I'm hoping that's the way it's going to go. And even Libra and stuff like that will bring, I think, more people towards Bitcoin. Hopefully we see better Lightning wallets with better UX, and we get the capacity to be able to take the next mass adoption wave. I kind of feel like we're similarly on the same path of like not quite sure if we're going to get to where we all, dream the promised land of $1 million Bitcoin is going to be.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't happen, it's like a 0.1% chance or even lower that it's going to be another altcoin that does it versus Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like Bitcoin's going to have a hard enough struggle to become that successful.
I mean, it's not even close. Can you imagine if it was any, if Ethereum was now as big as Bitcoin is today and Bitcoin was the size that Ethereum is today, then you know that Vitalik would spend all of his days in Senate hearings, right? I mean, it's insane.
That's true.
Just imagine how things would. No one wants this. Vitalik for sure doesn't want this. That's terrible for him. And it's bad for Ethereum holders too. They just don't get it yet. It's just bad for anyone. It's not going to work.
If that happened, if let's say in the flippening world, in an alternate universe, right?
Which is really, it's like we might as well imagine that we can fly and whatever because.
Would you quit? Would you give up on it all? Or would you go, what would you do if that happened?
It's not that I would quit. I think that I just don't see how anything works. I think that very fast, if you mean like flipping, I don't care, right? That the price of Ether, I mean, I would be wrecked beyond belief if that happens. But other than that, I don't care if, at some point I get stopped out, and I don't care if flipping's Bitcoin, right? But I just think that if the thing that keeps all of those shitcoins afloat is that Bitcoin is the elephant in the room, and everyone knows that even if, okay, so we can tackle EOS, right? Let's say we shut down EOS. We could. Let's say we did that. Then what? Nothing changed in the world. So what's the point? Why go through the entire process and the fight and the mess and the risks of trying to do that if Bitcoin still stares around and it's the real threat? So what's the point in killing one of the small shitcoins? But if Bitcoin is no longer a threat for whatever reason, then the rest are done, man. I mean, it's so easy to take them apart. They're just done. The only reason they exist is because Bitcoin is taking the spotlight right now. And if Bitcoin is not there to protect the rest of the shitcoins, then they're pretty much doomed. They just don't have what it takes to stick around at the face of adversity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that I would give up. I think that they would give up and there would be nothing left, basically. Obviously, I think that the idea won't die, right? So people would probably try to find some replacement for Bitcoin, but it's definitely not going to be one of those SQL wannabes. They're just too easy to stop.